Oh, the music. That's great. I love that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Landon Mascareñas, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good morning from Colorado. I love seeing the Colorado representation from Luis. Luis, congratulations to you. And I just want to, before we jump in to the keynote and the presentation, I first just want to say that I have enormous amount of gratitude and respect for every one of you here today, the superintendents in Alas who are leading the charge for equity and community and walking the razor's edge during this moment of incredible transformation in our education system. Just my enormous gratitude and respect. I work with superintendents every day across the state and around the country, and just want to say thank you for all that you do for our communities and families. I want to thank Education Elements, in particular Anthony Kim, for inviting me to speak here today. Thank you for that, an incredible honor. And also thank you to Alas. You know, I've known about your work for a really long time, in particular through the work of our incredible leader here in Denver, Susana Cordova, who is just a really personal, a dear personal friend and hero of mine. And just want to say thank you to everyone here for the work that you've done. I think I have to get access to present my screen. Looks like I still don't have access, so I'll keep moving here. Thank you for that introduction. You know, over the course of my my life and time, I've had the opportunity to do some really incredible work with people all over this country, and it's been a really, and I feel very honored to be able to have done the things that were in my biography there, and really think about them really as an opportunity to both learn a lot of lessons, tough lessons, and achieve things that my ancestors never thought were possible. And so the thing that I want to speak to you about today is what I believe is our moment in our society right now to build the open system. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I just want to, again, reiterate my gratitude for the space and grace that you're offering me today. You know, these are some of the things I've had the opportunity to do in my career. Some of them were mentioned earlier, and I just want to name that. That from at 11 o'clock, that's where I taught first grade on the Navajo Nation in Church Rock, New Mexico, where I first became aware of this incredible problem in our society, which is that even though that a small dirt road separated my school and the broader community of Church Rock on the Navajo Nation, it might as well have been a chasm. That in too many of our communities, our education systems are divorced, separated, and closed off from the communities they serve. So I learned this lesson first teaching first grade, and then as I worked in a national organization, helped launch an initiative that started to help me think differently about my role as both as a biracial man, as both Latino and Anglo, thinking through the work of what does it mean to be in solidarity with my Native allies and co-conspirators on the ground in New Mexico, and launched something called the Native Alliance Initiative to bring culturally responsive instruction, to recruit more Native educators, and then went off to grad school to learn about public policy and politics and organizing, helped launch a Native school network. I came back to Denver and Colorado, where I grew up both in California and Colorado, and my family's from here for quite some time. But I had a chance to work in the Family Engagement Office in DPS, which I learned a lot more about what we're going to talk about today, which is to go beyond this small notion of family engagement into the broader idea of open systems. And I had an opportunity to work also in advocacy, and now at the Colorado Education Initiative, also appointed to the community college system, and recently got to broaden my perspective around food justice and access in Denver. At the Colorado Education Initiative, we believe transformation comes through redesign, and that through redesigning public systems, transformation and therefore I think liberation is possible. But that great systems as they're redesigned have 6 critical components, and you can see this list here. Truly that we've seen that whether it's in Colorado or across the country, when systems go through a redesign process and include these critical components, there is tremendous opportunity to rethink and have an incredible impact. In the opening, they talk a little bit about some of the projects I'm a part of, but on the left, there's an opportunity through this project funded for Caring for Colorado called Youth Connections, which is a socio-emotional ecosystem development initiative where we are really building the capacity of school systems across Colorado in this idea of thriving resiliency, socio-emotional development. in the center of the Homegrown Talent Initiative, which is that economic development. The idea is, what if we busted down the silos between community colleges, K-12, business, and higher ed in rural Colorado for the purposes of getting the community to rethink what was possible in the context of that redesign would be an incredible opportunity. And then very recently also I've had a chance to launch equity councils across the state of New Mexico, but also then bring them to Boulder Valley here in Colorado for the purposes of taking on a really important question around school resource officers and police in schools, doing a community-driven approach to rethinking that work. But the fundamental questions that I'm here to ask you all today and to have a conversation with you all about is, why openness, why us, and why now? And in my belief that open versus closed is the great question of our time. And that really because it's a question of design. When Stafford Beers wrote his seminal work, Designing Freedom, back in the 70s, he talked about something that I think is pretty clear to all of us in education, which is that any system, however intentional or functional, is producing the outcomes of its design. And he talked a lot about open versus closed systems through a context of cybernetics, which is the idea of a closed system resists the information from its outside community versus an open system, which is open and receiving the information and always adapting to it. And I believe that this question of open versus closed is actually now more important than left versus right. Even The Economist, a global magazine that reports on news and events, talks a lot about this idea of thinking about closed versus open. Are we going to build the walls? Or are we going to let the different ideas flow within the system? And so when we think about public education and we think about public systems, I believe that the moment of our generation is now called upon us to act to open up systems to the communities they serve. And we see closed systems all around us, that in the amber encased within these systems, all the isms and biases and structural racism and oppression that was forged by our ancestors and put into those systems. And the moment in time for us is now to open them up, which is fundamentally democracy building work. And it requires open hearts, open minds, and openness to new ideas to work with our communities to redesign the future. And how does that work? At the Kennedy School at Harvard, Professor Mark Moore talks a lot about in any public system requires three critical components: naming a public value, working with a set of authorizers to build legitimacy and support, and building operational capacity. And that through co-creation, that is building that public value with those in your community, you have the opportunity to reinvent what is possible and rethink what's possible through the infusion of new ideas. And that sometimes people stop there. They do an incredible design process, but then stop. But he says that it goes beyond that into co-production, which is marrying operational capacity with the communities you serve. And then I often give the example of my mom, who's a principal. When she was asked to start a school in California, they said, let's build a STEM school. But she went out to her community and found out that arts should be included. So she went through the triangle process to co-create and co-produce with her families and added art into it. So it became a STEAM school. And you do this all every day as Latino administrators and superintendents around this country. You're constantly co-creating and co-producing. But fundamentally, we don't see enough of it across education, in policing, in healthcare, in transportation, and across our public systems. And that through co-creation and co-production, there is the possibility of transformation and liberation and the infusion of equity in a way that's never before seen possible. And there are 5 critical principles that I often talk about through the work of open system work. First, co-creation and co-production in all things. That's all the way in a classroom, all the way up to the superintendent's office. That a classroom should be co-creating with the families and communities, doing things like home visits and co-producing with communities, as well as the superintendent. And it's a fractal pattern that goes up and down across the entire system. You also have to have radical inclusion. Not just inclusion that's a box to check, but a radical sense of going even further and beyond to bring new voices into the process. In Boulder Valley, not only did we say, let's have an open application that received 900 applications for our equity council, we also named some critical community stakeholders to be on it. We also did a random selection of process akin to a jury selection, where we brought new voices who would have never applied to be a part of the equity council to be included and a part of our work. We have to have abundance partnerships in our society, in our systems. Scarcity is too often the norm, and that we need to partner with other organizations for the purposes of abundance. whether it's the community college or whether it's another organization, in my experience, that when you meet other leaders who are committed to rethinking what is possible, you have to hold abundance as a core value, or the gravitational pull of scarcity will pull you back. You have to believe in shared power and liberation. When we did the Year Zero process in Denver Public Schools, which was a community-driven turnaround process where we had a year to build a community-driven design plan for the future of a set of schools, both in Southwest Denver and in Northeast Denver. Many of these schools had lost trust, completely lost trust. Some of them were on the verge of civil rights complaints. But through the process of the leaders having open hearts and open minds and sharing power with the community about the future of the schools have seen not only academic transformation, but a restoration of trust and connection with the communities they serve. But fundamentally, none of this is possible unless there are leaders who are open hearts, open minds, and open to the new ideas of modeling what an open future could be like. I believe that this is truly the great arsenal of our democracy, the agency, expertise, and talent of our students, families, and communities. And that when this energy is infused within our system, enormous things are possible. So why us? Why Latinos? I believe that as Latinos, we have an obligation to both honor and repair the work of our ancestors. We understand the duality of open and closed because it lives within us. We have been, in many of our cases, both the colonizers and the colonized. And that by holding and understanding both the open and closed, we have a potential to form a boundary-spanning relationship between the past and the future, between the closed systems and the open systems. When I think about this incredible new book that I've just begun to get into by Laura Gomez, Inventing Latinos, she talks a lot about how can we not see the creation of Latinos as a product of colonization, first by Spain in this world, in this hemisphere, but then by the United States after the Mexican-American War. And how can we not see the duality of that colonizer and the colonized as a key component of our identity that we have to interrogate and explore? When I think about my own personal family history, which I've had the incredible opportunity to look back, I've traced the Mascarenhas name all the way back to the 1100s in Portugal, where we were a part of the Order of Santiago, a part of the Reconquista that were involved in a holy war pushing Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula, and then became conquistadors in India and Morocco, and eventually made their way to Mexico in the 1500s. And through that experience, we became Mexican. But then we were a part of another Reconquista, that after the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 in the 1690s, my family walked from Mexico City all the way to Nuevo Mexico, and were a part of the colonization of the indigenous communities of that time. I have to know that, because a part of my journey as a Latino leader in education has to be to repair the work of our ancestors, to be able to think through understanding what it would mean to disrupt and open up the systems that my family had a role in perpetuating. But I also have to honor the journey of my ancestors. This is the immigration card of my great-grandmother, Rafaela, who came to the United States in 1922 by walking across the border in El Paso, and came to Boulder, Colorado in the 1920s, lived in a train car during the winter, and had my grandmother, Maria. Now, Maria got to go to Boulder Valley schools and was born in America. But in her first grade year, she was held back and shamed for speaking Spanish. And that shame meant it so that she never taught my dad or any of his 5 siblings Spanish. So in our society, again, this is in the Latino culture, we also understand this dual shame. To be shamed for speaking Spanish, but then now shamed for not knowing Spanish. And I have to honor the journey of my great-grandparents and my grandmother and the work that they did. And think about what it would mean to honor the journey of our ancestors, included in the curriculum and culture and language that we believe that is a part of the incredible honor and legacy of the indigeneity of the Latino culture, but also recognizing the broader culture and context that we're a part of. This is an incredible opportunity. And how can I not think as a biracial man about my role in the Anglo side of my family's role, coming to California in the Dust Bowl in the 30s and being a part of that process where my parents could meet in a land that was formerly Mexico. So why now? Because I believe that we can wait no longer. I believe that power is never given and it must be taken. And then if we're really going to open up our systems to the communities they serve, that we have an obligation to understand and remember that this is our country. and that we are a significant part of it, more significant than the media would ever let us believe. And that we have an obligation to know this as Latino administrators leading and driving change in the communities around our country. And that we are increasing. And that it's been our country in some parts of it for quite some time. And then we think about the border between Mexico and the United States, we have to kind of recognize and rethink, what does it mean for us to have a conversation in this country that the significant amount of this country was a part of Mexico? But that even in that colonization, we have to remember that the role of our four ancestors in their role of colonizing indigenous people in this communities as well. But let's think about it and understand that if this is our country and we have an opportunity, we have to fight for it. So will we open or close? Now I'm going to ask you, imagine a wave of Latino superintendents administrators opening up all of these schools and district systems, creating vehicles for millions of Latino families to practice democracy through the redesign of their education systems, inspiring their friends and families to open up other systems in policing, health, and transportation, leading to a new birth of democracy, that open future where everyone can live their greatest life. So I ask you to join me and let us build that open future together. Thank you.